I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar formally, and that is how to best use contact center metrics. Certainly been very popular in terms of the number of people booking onto it. And delighted to present two speakers for today's webinar. The first is new to our webinar program, but I have seen Natalie keynote speeches on a number of occasions. So I think you're all in for a treat there. Natalie, you're with a consultancy called CX High Performance. Would you like to do a sort of brief introduction?
Yeah, so hi everybody, welcome. I'm delighted to be here first of all, and thank you, Jonty, for inviting me. So at CX High Performance, we look at how we can engage employees to do more for customers. So it's about improving employee performance and delivering more to customers, not just in terms of satisfaction and delight, but also in terms of that intrinsic value. So I'll talk more about that later on and let you get on, Jonty, there. Good to be here.
Also, it's great to have you here. Also delighted to welcome back Justin Robbins. Justin is probably about your third or fourth webinar with us, which where you were previously under the ICMI guys, and you've now got a new exciting role.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, I joined the team at Talkdesk, and if you're not familiar with Talkdesk, we're Enterprise Cloud Contact Center. Moved from consulting and training, and now working with the team here, developing content, and really just kind of bridging the gap for all of us as contact center leaders of how do we really deliver great customer experiences, right? If that's how we want to differentiate, what does it take for that to actually happen? So that's where I'm focusing today.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here, and it was also great to meet you back in November when I went across the States for a conference. So which is great. So if you want to watch today's webinar, you can do that on Catch Up, callcenterhelp.com/recorded webinars. I know a lot of you do like to share that with your teams. We're also carrying on the discussion today in the chat room. It's very useful to be logged into that. So if you'd like now to go and set up a new window, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Just put in your first name, last name, and email. It does come up in a separate window, so if you perhaps put the chat room on one side and the webinar slide on the other side, you can see both things going on at the same time. There are a couple of advantages of being in the chat room. The first is that you can download the webinar slides, which are going to be on this link over here, and so you can download the slides. There's a lot of detail we're going to be going into, particularly in Natalie's presentation, so it'd be quite useful to get some of those charts from that. And also another advantage, you can ask questions or you can leave a tip. And for the best tip today, we have a bottle of champagne. Here's one that we've got specially prepared, a rather nice bottle there. Or if you prefer a box of chocolates or an Amazon gift card, we can certainly ship that out as well. So I think we'll tie in nicely. But we're going to start off with a poll, and we're just going to have a look at from metrics. How well do you think your contact center metrics are working today? So just a simple scale, 1 to 5, 5 being very well, 1 being not at all. So how well do you think your contact center metrics are working today? I don't know if you've got an idea of how well people are going to be scoring this. Not sure if we've lost Natalie there.
No, I'm here. Sorry, did I not catch you there?
Yeah. So which score do you think is going to come up top vote?
Oh, that's an interesting one, isn't it? I think we're going to go for okay to well.
Okay, well, let's have a look at that. And I think you're absolutely spot on there. So it's certainly the majority are thinking okay. Now there is this element of self-selection that perhaps people joining today are the ones who aren't going to be in the top section overall. So I think that's interesting. Right, now we're going to follow up with another poll, and we're going to ask the same question now, but we're going to ask it from how well do your frontline staff think the metrics are working overall? So here's the poll. Would you say your staff think they're working very well? They're okay, not very well, or do you think they're working not at all? So how would your frontline staff think that the metrics working overall. So let's just have a look at this one. And Justin, do you think it's going to be any different, the vote?
I mean, I think it might be a little bit, the hard part about this one is, we're answering for our employees right now. So we're probably based off of, do they complain a lot about the things we're holding them accountable for? Is there some tension there? And, I'm going to bet that for a majority of the people that are on, yeah, they're feeling some tension.
Okay, well, let's have a look. And it's similar, but they're certainly skewed towards okay to not well rather than okay to well. So I think there's some interesting lessons to be based there. And let's ask the same question again in a slightly different way. As you know, we do like in the UK to ask the same question a number of times if you've been following some of our politics. And the question I'd like to say is, what do your customers think on how your metrics are working? Do they think they're working very well? Do you think they're okay, or do you think they're not very good on that? So let's just have a look at the votes. How do your customers think the metrics are working? By the way, the last poll had a sample size of 113. So let's have a look at I think we've got most of the answers in here. And so I'll just share the results. So what we see here is a rather similar result to the frontline staff, which is skewed slightly more to the bottom, potentially slightly better than the frontline employees would be thinking. So Natalie, that's 3 polls, all with somewhat different answers on that.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? If you look at the other stats that come through, right? So most people working in contact centers believe their stats are doing a good job, so we're okay and well, the management level. But interestingly, when you ask customers, they actually say that metric are not necessarily working in their favor at all, especially because the main customer experience is often, holding on, the IVR type situation. So. But that bears out what we believe about our sector, that we're doing an okay job, but customers tell us differently often, so it'd be interesting.
Indeed. Well, now is probably a good time to bounce across to Natalie. And Natalie, I know you've got quite a good presentation on how to be successful with contact center metrics. So if I just pass the control across to you, if you'd like to put the slide up on your screen and take us through your presentation. We can see that now. Thank you.
Now we're in business. Can you see it? You can see that clearly. Great. Okay, so hi again, everybody, and a big thank you to Jonty. I also want to call out Rachel, who does the support in the background, who's been absolutely awesome in helping me. So thank you so much. I am delighted to be here. I think it's been about 15 years in the coming, so it's a big day for me today, so thank you. A little bit on that introduction that I did earlier on. I just want to let you know, just so that you know, I've actually worked with over 100 different contact center operations across the UK, Europe, USA, and Asia. So there's a wealth of experience there. And now at CX High Performance, we help guide and shape our clients into delivering better things for their customers. So I'm going to take you through a few things this morning, but I want to also tell you a little bit about what we do. We're involved in performance improvement, specifically around how do you get your teams performing a lot better, massive employee engagement programs, and leadership development and coaching, the one-on-one stuff that actually is probably at some points really, really enjoyable if an individual wants to be really challenged and change the way they're working. We don't do fluffy coaching. We do coaching which is about, let's get this transition and transformation on the track. And we work with a whole different variety of different organizations on that journey. Okay, so no more of me. What I'm going to take you through is the bit of background about our sector, the journey that we've been on to get to where we are. I want to talk about next generation contact center metric, and just the question out there is it really time for action really in what we're doing? I think it's important to start with the awesome journey, because when I visit and go to a lot of different contact centers, I see a whole plethora of different statistics around. And I think they've come from a different world that maybe was a while back and isn't so current. So as I go through this, maybe you can think in your minds, where am I on this journey today when it comes to the key metric in my contact center? But for me, it's not just about metric, it's also about reporting, because it's what you report up to the boardroom that really matters. So let's start with starting at the beginning. So I'd say wave and hand raise if you were around in the 80s, but I don't think too many people were here. So back in the 80s when contact centers formed, they formed from admin functions, back office, front office coming together to really fundamentally reduce costs. And we first heard this term call center be shouted out. It was pretty isolated in the organization and very reactive. And basically that operation looked at things like how quickly can we answer the phone? How can we be more efficient and reduce cost? Okay, and so that was a very much efficiency driven, once it became established, type operation. We then shifted along into the 90s. It's quite fun how this works out by decade, by the way. And we all started talking about value. Okay, so what's the value of this operation, this beast for some people that I've created? How can it be more proactive? We started to go from just incoming calls to outbound calls and teleselling even more, cross-selling started to get involved. And that operation realized it couldn't work out on a limb within the organization. It had to be more involved in everything going on day to day. So how could I create better value from what I was doing? So suddenly we started to see some value-based metric coming in, and most of those metrics were about sales performance. And average order value was another one classically that came in there. So you can see I'm back in the 80s and back in the 90s right now. I wonder if some of you watching this are thinking, well, actually, that still applies to us. So let's come forward now we've gone to the 90s, so we go to the noughties, right? And the noughties are generally where we are sitting now. And we're talking about, we're the experienced generation, aren't we? I am blessed to have two young girls. I've got twin daughters, and they're 11 years old, bless them. And wow, are they part of the experienced generation? And if nothing has an experience in it, it is just not good enough. But we talk about customer experience now. I was reading a report yesterday where after 5 to 10 years of using the word experience, it's now become mainstream and acceptable at board level that it's about customer experience. So that operation is more integrated, it's based on intelligence, and we're starting to see much more use of analytics, both locally and globally. So now we're into we've gone past the noughties and we're in the teens, and we're at the back end of the teens, because this experience stuff has lasted for quite a while. So where are we now? Where are we now? Well, we're moving swiftly forward, aren't we? And we're moving into something that is very different. And that is about community. So how can we create communities within our contact centers that work really well for customers and also really well for employees? It's much more intuitive. We'll see the growth of AI and chatbots now kind of streamlining ahead, and it provides insight into the organization. So there's our 4 generations through our quite phenomenal CX journey that I've certainly been really delighted to be part of. But the big but is, now is the most exciting time. Everyone watching this and being part of this, you have to know that you are literally at the cusp, at the forefront of a change that's going on for everybody around the world. Because it's no longer just about a moment of truth. It's about moments of truth. It's about omnichannel. So with what we're doing with our metric, is that really fitting with where we are today? Or are we actually dealing with metric that are more based around where we were yesterday? And I think it's quite, if you think about your contact center kind of feedback that we've just had on the polls, I was delighted to hear a couple of people, I think someone mentioned delighted customers was the #1. This is a poll that Call Center Helper did back in last year, looking at what were the most important contact center metric. And you can see customer sat is at 95%, 95.7. And what's really interesting is FCR is the second one in the line, but the gap between the two is significant, isn't it, by any stretch of the imagination? It's what, 27% difference between the #1 and #2 key things to focus on. But what is customer satisfaction? What is it? What is it? Is that the point they put down the phone and then the automated system rings them back and says, were you satisfied with that call? Or is it something that the advisor does themselves? They put down the phone and they tick a box on their system? Or is it some in-depth research report that was done saying our customers are satisfied? Because you know what? I'm not sure if it's just about customer satisfaction. And when I look at the rest of the things down on this list, I'm really wondering, what are we doing with our metric? Are we really advancing our operations the same way that we should be right now as we're on the cusp of a whole new world out there? We've got web chat, we've got social media, but are we living in some kind of bubble? You know, if any of you is out there on Twitter and you're on Facebook and LinkedIn, you know this symptom where you can live and exist in a social bubble. And that bubble is the fact that all the algorithms are reading all about you, so they present data and information you're interested in. And after a while, you become bubbleized, really, and you're just in this bubble. And the problem with the bubble is you've got no new stuff coming in to change your views and perspective, and all it does is make you more rigid that what you were doing was right in the first place. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the social bubble that goes on. I did wonder when I put this together, you know, have we got a metric bubble going on? That we're stuck in our metric, actually, that's kind of 2 generations practically old. But I'll throw that out for you, because some of these things are important. But you know what? They're hygiene factors. These things are what are expected now. They are the 101 of running a contact center. So we've got to come out of the hygiene factors and we've got to come out of the metric bubble. You know what? It's simply not where we need to be. So we've got a mission control that needs to change. We've also got a group of people. Interesting. So I know Rachel's in the background here. Rachel, something's happened with the pictures on my slides. If you could just prepare to put up this deck that you've got, that would be terrific. Thank you, and then we'll do a switch. Was that cool? Have I just maintained my cool pitch? Okay. So what you've got to imagine here is a picture of people, okay? So, but actually, if you take that imagination a step further, the cost of your contact center operations, roughly when they're all put together, about 70% of your contact center operation cost comes through your people. Right? Do you know what? I'm so glad at the beginning, Rachel, that I gave you a vote of thanks, right? Because you've just done that magic trick. If everybody could do a round of applause for Rachel, yay! Thank you, thank you. Okay. So I'll just, if I just say click and we'll do this as a team, Rachel. Thank you. So, okay, so we've got 70% of our costs based on our people. I'm going to say it again. 70% of the cost of running your contact center is based on your people. Now, you and I both know that as AI comes along, what's the budget everyone's going to look to reduce, right? You know, I know, it's going to be the people budget, while all these other new sexy technologies are taking more root within your organization. But the truth is that when you look at customers, they're not ready for that massive change. I picked up one report that said 85% of contact center staff will be gone by 2020. And I'm thinking, well, is that really going to happen in the next 8 months? I don't think so. I don't think customers are quite ready for it. And most successful business are customer-led, not technology or people or process-led, right? Okay, so we're going to have our people around for a little more. And I'm sure Justin will maybe pick up on that when he does his session later on. So we know that our people are really important, and we know that our customers are important when they get to the right destination. And we know that when customers are loyal, they spend more, they spend it more frequently, and they spend it on an ongoing, repetitive basis. So you're probably familiar with RFM modeling, recency, frequency, and monetary value. That's the key aspect that we're looking at from our customer. So I don't think it's so much about a customer lying on a beach and being satisfied. I think it's much more about experience, because we're living in a changing world. So let's cue Rachel and move into the next generation contact centers, because I want to talk about successful metric. So far, 5 things that are going to be changing right now in the next 5 years. AI is going to automate simple tasks. I've got an echo in my mind of offshoring, getting rid of simple tasks, and inshoring, removing, but I'll leave that for one moment. Advisors are going to deal with more complex stuff. I'm sure we're all agreed on that. Social media, messaging, and mobile will take over. Complaints will become more prevalent. And also, finally, we're going to talk about this whole piece around where do we need to go for contact center metric. So Rachel, thank you. The big differentiator is that customer experience and employee experience is going to be the largest business differentiator by 2020. Now, we are seeing that live as we speak. We know customer experience has come of age. We know customer experience is directly linked to customer loyalty and customer value. And employee experience now has shifted quite significantly, I would suggest, in the last 3 years, with employee engagement becoming a really important boardroom level discussion. Most HR directors now are charged with the simple fact of improving employee engagement. So we've got two big areas, customer experience and employee experience. And they both go above satisfaction, okay? This isn't about being satisfied. I think a great friend of mine, Richard Stollery, who's got, worked with for years and years, he gave a quote last week, and he very simply said he was reading the Jim Collins book, and Good to Great, and chapter 1, the heading is, good is no longer good enough, right? Good is no longer good enough. We've got to be playing in the big business agenda and the big business arena. So that's where I think the main big message from my session is, let's now start lifting up, raising the game. Let's get out of the metric bubble. Let's get rid of the hygiene factors. Let's make them hygiene. Lift our sights up and go to where we need to be. Because otherwise, we're going to have some bigger issues facing us as we go down the line. Okay. Rachel, I'm going for the clicker on my, thank you. This was some work from Harvard. And very simply, what is going to be the big factors that bring success, right? So 2 things I'm highlighting first. High level of customer service, 80% of businesses are saying that, right? So we've got to deliver that, tick. High level of employee engagement, 71% of businesses are saying that, right? But number 2 and number 4 are down to you. You, the people listening to this webinar. Effective communication of what's going on, right? To engage your people. And fourthly, strong executive leadership. Now, there's a problem with our executive leadership, right? Our executive leadership were born back in the 80s and 90s, and they're still looking at the old metric. So I would put to you, everybody here involved in metric, it's time to up the game and re-educate the executive leadership on what the business needs to deliver high levels of customer service and employee engagement. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, if we click again. So let's look at what this can deliver for some organizations. So this is just really high level, looking at what it's being delivered if you focus on the customer. So you'll deliver 17% more in terms of customer loyalty and value, and your revenues look to increase about 11%. And the top 10 Net Promoter programs deliver 5 times more across businesses, okay? So there's some real genuine traction here in looking at customers. And they're looking at employees as well. Those organizations that focus on employees are 21% more profitable, deliver a massive 122% more improved business performance. And we know that they deliver a real differentiator in terms of performance delivery. So this is the message here, which is saying bring together customer experience and employee experience, but the key trick is going to be in bringing them together. Thank you, Rachel. I feel like I'm playing tennis or something in Wimbledon. I'm kind of thanking for the balls or something. Okay, so to try and summarize that in terms of where you're going with metric now for the next generation, I think this really kind of summarizes it through. We call it the value zone, right? So at the bottom, you've got productivity and cost, which is our traditional metric. These are our hygiene factors, and they are a basis on which we need to operate, okay? But we've got to lift our sights higher. And on the right-hand side, we've got to start looking at employee value, not just employee satisfaction. And that's based on 2 things. One is their performance they deliver to us and employee experience. And on the left-hand side, we're looking at customer loyalty, which is the value of the customer. And that's about the effort it takes to deal with the customer and the experience that we give them. And when we bring that together, we can start to really determine the value of CX and EX. And CX and EX coming together is potentially the most powerful business weapon that you have. Because when it comes to making tough decisions about what you're going to do with your contact center, over the next 2 or 3 years as AI and chatbots, etc., come further in. This is going to be critical for understanding employee value and customer loyalty to deliver better overall business performance. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so this is some work that we did with a whole series of different organizations, looking at if you can capture that, what people are doing really well, and you can capture when they deliver great things for customers and people and employees are really engaged, you can start to get some real shifts in performance. So if you look at a team here, look at an average team from the base that we looked at, right? And you took your team and divided them up into 4 quartiles. Generally speaking, this is the kind of performance output that you would get. I'm talking about performance, not necessarily productivity. So in quartiles 4 and quartile 3, you're at the lower level ranking of performance on a scale of 1 to 1.1. Now in quartile 2 performers, you're going to double that performance, which is good. But where you need to be as an organization is at quartile 1 performance. So imagine that you can line up all the people in your organization and identify really clearly your quartile 1 performers. Now, I am no way suggesting then you get rid of quartile 2, 3, and 4, right? That's not what we do, okay? Yeah. What we have to do is understand what quartile 1 are doing that makes them so great and learn how to replicate it and how to share it and how to transfer that knowledge and skills, okay? So what's key to this is your data, your analytics, and your metric to determine what quartile 1 is all about, which is really what does great look like. Now, I promise you, I absolutely promise you, you've all got quartile 1 in your current organizations, right? But maybe you haven't found them yet. And that's because we're still down in the hygiene factors rather than determining value for employees and for customers. Okay, thank you, Rachel. So what we did was we did a lot of work around this, and through the work well, a bit of background, first of all. We took a number of organizations and tracked them for a year. We looked at their behaviors and we looked at what their key capabilities and competencies were. And then we looked at all of their KPIs and determined those organizations that were delivering at quartile 1 performance, what were they doing differently? What were they doing differently to the other organizations? And within the other organizations, we looked at just their quartile 1 performance and determined what they did differently against the other people in their own organization. And this is the end result of a lot of work over a year. And it comes down to 6 key areas or laws or pillars that organizations that deliver at quartile 1 deliver really well. So they're customer obsessed, they've got a really strong purpose, culture and community, they're great at performance improvement, not necessarily performance management, there's a difference, development and reward and recognition. And in fact, behind that, there are over 45 indicators that will determine how well you're doing. Okay, but what I'm going to hone in on today is purpose, right? Because purpose is critical to understanding what you're doing with your KPIs. What do you mean, Natalie? Purpose and KPIs, that doesn't make sense. Well, it does totally, because as we went through this journey, those people in quartiles 3 and 4, the biggest feedback they gave us was they didn't understand what their KPIs meant. In fact, when you looked at the quartile that were delivering best performance, quartile 1, they had an alignment between understanding what their organizational purpose was and the delivery of their traditional KPIs. So if Rachel, thank you so much. So the first thing we had to understand was, be clear on your purpose. What is the purpose of your contact center organization, and therefore what is the purpose of your contact center metric? Okay, so are you a traditional mass factory? Are you working in lots of different product groups or silos or processes known as what we would call fragmented? Are you delivering a high-level VIP type service, maybe more one-to-one? A lot of financial services organizations try and deliver that type of service to VIPs, more of a concierge premium service, or a business class type service, if you're in the airline business. Or are you actually striving to be in this community organization? An organization for your CX and EX which is driven through community, and it's about delivering value. And what you see here is very simply those organizations at the bottom that are cost-driven on the right for mass or product-driven on the left, fragmented, have really got these efficiency metric around them. But those that are at the top are looking at premium and community. So let's assume we're going for community, and that's kind of the area most organizations generally are going for. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so how do you get this purpose aligned with your key performance indicators? Well, there is a process that there is in life, and every operational person here will probably go few at this point. There is a process. There is. So what we have to line up is our purpose with our strategy, our critical success factors, capability, and our key performance indicators, right? Now, what most contact center metrics do is skip the top bit and just go straight into the bottom bit. They just deal with KPIs. And the problem with that is you get this disconnect because people don't work for KPIs. They work with purpose, a real sense of purpose of what they're delivering. Let me take you through a quick example of how it would work outside of work so that it becomes really clear. So let's say it's Happy New Year time and you've decided, you can hand raise, we should do a poll on this, Jonty, if you've decided to get fit or meet new people, and that's your purpose for the next 12 months. And what's the strategy that's going to sit behind that? Okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to run the 2020 marathon, right? I've got my goal set now. That will help me deliver my purpose and then my strategy. Underneath that, I've got some what we would term as critical success factors. Okay, I need to build up my speed. I need to do my endurance or stamina, that might be. And my motivation, that's the big one, isn't it? Every day, get out of bed and go for a run. So I've got to build my capability. I've got to do my drills. I've got to do my diet. Here, I need my rest, physio, and visualization. That's my capabilities. I've got to grow as a person to deliver my purpose and to deliver my strategy. And then underneath that, I've got my key performance indicators. That's the hard bit, isn't it? 6 drills a day. I've got to swim 3 times a week. I've got to get 8 hours sleep. You know, that can be a tough for someone if you've had too much caffeine, and so forth. So what we're doing in terms of our contact center world is we're living at the bottom. So it gives us greater control, right? But I've got greater motivation sitting at the top of the slide. So I don't want to be a command and control organization. I want to be empowered and connected, right? So I've got to be working at the top. And I'll only understand that if I understand why, if I do 6 drills a day, is it going to lead me through to getting fit and meeting new people? And I don't need to be reminded of my 6 drills a day, right? I need to be reminded about getting fit and running the marathon. The rest of it will start to happen if I focus on purpose. So let's now take you through a business example. Thank you, Rachel. So let's say I'm going to build the best community of widget lovers in the world, right? I have done this process with many organizations. I remember doing it for one of the largest telcos. And what happened was, it was really, we had, you know, you have to do this type of thing as a workshop. So it's a bit like customer journey mapping. You get 20 people in a room and you've got brown paper and Post-its everywhere. And what happens is everyone says, well, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. So you end up with a really big join the dots session. But at the end of it, you have massive light bulb moments. With one of the UK's biggest roadside companies, when we went through this process, the financial director came in at the end of the day and said, right, I want to get a review of what's happened, because he was responsible there for a lot of the metric. And he just sat there and was like, wow, I can see what we're doing has a sense of purpose. So if that happens at board level, imagine what happens when you start to roll it out. So my strategy is to be #1 in the market. That's clear. So what are my critical success factors? Well, business growth, world-class service, employee experience, customer experience, right? That's based on balanced scorecard thinking, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. So that's commercial for business growth, operational world-class service, people, employee experience, and customer experience. Okay. Capabilities. These are the capabilities I need to focus on for the next 12 months, perhaps. For business growth, I need to sort my leadership capability out. World-class service, good old Tom, target operating model needs sorting out, and get my technology in place, right? Get my people really on board. Employee experience, I'm going to really focus on dynamic, motivational performance improvement. For customer experience, I'm going to look at that real nitty-gritty. I'm going to map the journeys and look at how we engage our customers at each and every touch point. You've been through some of that stuff. You're doing some of that stuff today. And then we say, right, what are the KPIs? And we've got a series of them that sit quite neatly under everyone, right? So it's business targets and budgets, achieving or exceeding, of course. Our customer to employee ratio for world-class service, and that's where we'll see our traditional service hygiene factors. That metric bubble is sitting right there now, right? For my employee experience, I look at my high performance ratios, and I also look at my employee engagement, customer loyalty, and recommendations on the right, really linked into NPS and effort. So if I was going to start anywhere with realigning my customer metric, it would be building my KPI pyramid. So my question to you all today, are you going to come out of the 80s and 90s and a bit of the noughties? Is it time for action before other organizations decide to take action? Because I'm seeing again, we had a period now where the customer service operation grew and had stature, and we've got the chief customer officer, we've got the customer experience director. You know what? IT is coming along and taking budget, and marketing are coming along and taking budget. Marketing are owning it for experience, IT for all the technology, and you know who potentially could fall down in the middle. If you take this action that I'm talking about today, which is number one, establish your CX value zone, know your purpose, align your purpose with your metric, please, please, please. And then there's two really important points. Communicate, 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 communicate. And at the end of the day, take the leadership role. You've got the biggest source of insight. Data is the new oil. You are all sitting on oil. Take the leadership. It's time for action, time for change. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Natalie. Some great takeaways there. You need to get out of the metric bubble. Self-service is going to increase, and so will the number of complaints that have come through linked to that. Customer experience and employee experience are going to be the biggest business differentiators as we move forward. And purpose is critical in knowing what you do with your contact center metrics. So some great takeaways there. Well, let's have a look at some of the questions that have been coming through. But before we do that, we've got an opinion in from Marina, who says call centers will only be at their best when we fully appreciate that customer-focused agent behaviors are at the forefront of delivering customer experience. And this measure is key. It's about how we're making our customers feel, the employee engagement, and how they feel and understand their role and impact on the customer is critical. I think this very much ties into what you were saying there, Natalie.
Can I add to that? Most clients I see, right, they've got employee engagement programs running, and they're being run by our friends and colleagues in HR, and everyone is feeling happy, right? But it's not employee engagement with purpose for the customer, right? And it's only when you link, it's like everyone's facing northeast rather than north. We're spending the money on the engagement programs just in the wrong direction. I'm not saying it's something you should chuck out, but if you just get it going in the right direction, I totally agree with Marina 4 here. That's where you get it to be powerful for the whole organization, but most importantly for the customer.
So we've got a question also in from Matt, who says, I've been introduced to a new metric for agent productivity from our executives called throughput. Not a traditional metric that I'm familiar with in contact centers. I'm personally used to using contacts per hour. Wanted to see if you've heard of this metric before and your opinions on it, if any. Now, Justin, throughput, that looks to me a little bit like occupancy or maybe, percentage work.
So I think my question would be how you're defining the term, because I've seen it thrown around a couple different ways. I guess my biggest caution here is it's getting to that point of, right, we're trying to reduce cost. I understand why we're doing it, but is that really focused on the desired outcome, right? And maybe it is, they're saying we just want to reduce cost, but I've heard of it, but again, I'm just really, anytime we're talking about a quantity metric like throughput, contacts per hour, there's a lot of red flags that there's something else counter to what you might be really trying to get at work there.
Yeah, I think it's the danger is it sounds like a manufacturing sort of factory-based thing. And unfortunately, like a factory process, you're very much at the dependency of when calls arrive. So things like occupancy is a feature of sort of random call arrival. So it's one. Certainly, I'd question the rationale behind that one. Barry asks a question. Says, I don't hear as much as I used to about customer effort. Do you think it's still a valuable metric to track? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Natalie. It was flavor of the month for for about a year in 2017.
Yeah, I think customer effort is actually growing. I think people see the simplicity of making it easy for customers. Amazon has really led the way in that, but not many organizations have got 10,000 people working in their software department to deliver the kind of simplicity and ease that's offered often through Amazon as an organization. But I think it's a very important one to look at for streamlining and making it easy to do business with. But it does not work alone. What's really important is that NPS sits above that, which is about what is the relationship between effort and value, okay? And bring those two together, because we've seen lots of work where you can put the effort in, but you don't get the value back, and it's value that you need. And I would just say that to Matt on the previous slide. Do some work now, looking not just at throughput, but look at what would happen if you extended the call duration and you took fewer contacts per hour. How much happier could your customers be, and how much more retained and loyal would they be to them more?
Indeed. We've also had a question in from Griselda, who says, what are the specific metrics we should be tracking to ensure we're providing EX and CX? We're very familiar with AHT hold times amongst others, but not sure what are the KPIs we should be focusing on to leave our bubble behind. I guess this is the key to this is getting the purpose right. But do you have any specific thoughts on the metrics to use, Natalie?
Griselda, great question. Thank you. If you go back to the value zone, the slide that we have the triangle on one side where you have the employee side, we were talking about building employee value. So really, what is it that makes a valuable employee? And that will be measured around performance, and there can be a number of criteria under that, and also the value that they bring to the organization. And on the other side of the coin, in terms of CX, you're looking, yes, at effort, but also experience. Now, what you can do is you bring those two together. It's part of what we've done. We've partnered with a company called ONCX to bring those two things together. ONCX you might be familiar with. They were all involved in developing NPS a long time ago. And the founder, Richard Owen, is involved now in ONCX. And what that does is look at all of the indicators that I talked about earlier on. There are 45 of them on the employee side, together with the indicators on NPS. And what we're able to do is to map and to pinpoint where you get leverage on both. So that, go back to the value zone and find the value.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to jump across to the chat room. We're going to be asking a question of our audience, which is, how do you get your people excited about the metrics that you're using? And it's probably a good time now to, while we're answering that question, to pass across to Justin Robbins. And Justin, I know you wanted to look at about how to use contact center metrics to drive success. So perhaps if you'd like to share with us your thoughts on where we need to be heading.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Johnny. And I think there's a couple things that I want to throw out just based off of kind of response to what Natalie has shared, and even some of the questions that just came up. Number one is, so the question that was just asked around what metrics should we measure? We can spend a lot of time going into depth, and actually there's something really cool that we're doing both across the US, and we're coming to London as well, and it's called the CX Tour. It's a free event, and actually part of that, I am leading a 2-hour workshop that's digging into that question. So anybody who's coming to that, we're actually going to walk through how do we decide what we measure. So that's one thing I want to throw out with that. Natalie actually made a comment about a lot of organizations, when they're implementing AI, they're using it to replace people, or that's a thought. And I'm either fortunate or unfortunate to have literally grown up in the contact center and have done extensive research around how organizations plan to use AI, and actually replacing live agents, replacing humans, doesn't even make it into their top 5 reasons why they would use it. It's actually to improve the customer experience. It's to enable their people to do more meaningful work. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of misconception, right, around how does technology and AI fit into this equation of metrics. And the last thing before we really, jump in here is I think we need to be thinking about our metrics in two ways: lag and lead. Right? These lead measures are the ones that are going to be predictive. In the case of, meeting people or running the marathon, it's, am I training for the marathon? Am I eating right? Doing those things predict an outcome. And then obviously whether or not I finish the race or I'm making a certain time or getting certain miles. So I think those are all considerations we need to be making here. Really, when it comes to using metrics to drive success, I just want to talk about three things in the short amount of time that we have, and really, more than anything, invite people into a conversation, because that, more than anything, driving success with metrics is about an invitation to a conversation of what is most important to us and how do we align our people, our process, and our technology to get there. So I love metrics. If you haven't already told, I'm really, really excited about this idea. But one of the most common questions that I've gotten in my time as a consultant and trainer is around the topic of benchmarking. And, Natalie has given us some ideas of metrics we should measure. Some of you have responded with, these are some of the things that you're measuring. And so often get the question of, well, where do benchmarks fit into all of that? So for me, I think it starts with a question, and that is, what do you want to achieve? If you are benchmarking, what is your hope with those benchmarks? And what you're going to find is that you should probably be setting 1, 2, or 3 goals with the benchmarks that you're using. And those 3 things could be, one is internal improvement. And my advice for people who are either just starting in their contact center roles or are really looking to evolve what they're measuring, the best indicator of success all day, every day, is where are you today and where do you want to be tomorrow, and setting that internal benchmark of, if we have a employee engagement rate of 60% today and we want to have an employee engagement rate of 70%, setting that benchmark and saying, what will it take for us to move the needle? If we want to ensure that our coaches are able to coach to every conversation that our quality analysts or our quality team are scoring, and today we're only coaching 1 out of every 5 that are QA'd, right? That's an excellent benchmark to move us towards success. So for me, it's this idea of first focus on what you know. How you measure and define first contact resolution. You don't know how your competitor measures or defines it. And so with that, the next piece with benchmarking is really looking at external reports for competitive intelligence to help you set some parameters to say, I am in financial services and I'm trying to understand, we have, this is our customer satisfaction rate. It's 43%. Is that good for financial services? Is that bad for financial services? We feel that is bad. External reports, that's where it starts to help you set the benchmark to understand what's in the competitive marketplace. The next place where benchmarking maybe fits in, not just about internal improvement, is about external recognition, right? Perhaps you're in a highly competitive place where awards and accolades are how people make their decisions. Then in that case, you absolutely want to be looking at external benchmarks and to say that, we are the employer of choice in the UK, or we are the most innovative company in terms of releasing new products to the market. These are the types of external benchmarks that then help give us credibility. They differentiate us. But if we're using it things like average handle time, well, I don't know what my competitor is expecting their agents to do. I don't know what their typical customer interaction is like, and so we have to be very careful with there. That actually brings me to my third point with that, is we don't always know the variables. And it's funny, Natalie, you mentioned some of the terms about how long some of these things have been going on. And I actually remember doing some research on the Bell Telephone Company and some of the first contact centers that were actually coming out in the 60s and how they were looking at kind of building all of these efficiencies. And then, we build the momentum into the next 2 decades. But even with first contact resolution, I look back to, honestly, 15 years ago, and one of the first sessions that I was doing when I was speaking was about creating a one-call experience. But for us, it was about making it easy for our customers. But I know, so for some organizations, what they're trying to do in a first contact is maybe use a lower paid or less experienced workforce, or they're looking for all of these types of variables. So we just have to be careful. We don't know what's there, and when it comes to our reports and benchmarks, again, we can make numbers say whatever we want them to say, and I give that to all of you as good or bad advice. But it's a number, and it can be manipulated, and so we have to be very, very careful both on how we're reporting our metrics, but also how we're interpreting the information that's coming to us. The question, though, Johnny, you asked is really about how do we get people excited, and part of it could be this. To an extent, I think some of us have a competitive spirit, and so we want to know that we're getting better at employee satisfaction, or we want to know that we're the employer of choice. But I actually think that the way to get people excited is to engage our employees in our process. If we really want to be about performance improvement, if we really want to be about engaged cultures, then we need to engage our people in performance improvement. We need to engage our people in creating our culture. And so then why are people not more excited about metrics? Well, we did this to ourselves. We created this, and Natalie, I to an extent agree with you that some of the leaders that are in our contact centers were there with an efficiency thing, but nobody's forced anyone to stay that way. And people who are new, and I'm relatively young, but I've been working in contact centers for 2 decades now, and there's opportunity to change if we recognize what we're doing wrong. And so what are we doing wrong, and maybe unknowingly? And number one is with metrics, we're often talking about our points of failure. Where have we neglected to hit numbers, and we just expect success all of the time, and we miss the opportunities to talk about progress along the way, or we just haven't clearly defined success. And so that next piece, and this actually goes to the question that we asked earlier, Jonty, of what would your employees say? What would your customers say? The reality is that we have this terrible misalignment between what we're measuring and what's important to not just us as a business, but to our employees and to our customers. And so even back to the research stat of a year ago of customer satisfaction being the most important thing, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice of asking the question of what's our most important metric, because we have 3 distinct audiences, and there are actually various parts of our organization that every single one of those has a most important metric, and within that there are those key indicators. And so I think we really need to step back, and the questions that we've surveyed to all of you, ask your employees, ask your customers, and find out where are those disconnects between the goals and the objectives that you're setting. And what you might find is that this third point is that you're holding people accountable for the wrong things. Either the wrong metrics, or the wrong people are being responsible for the wrong metrics. And so we've got to be very, very careful there. And the last piece with why are people not more excited is because this is the way that it's always been. To the point of, if somebody's been leading a contact center for a decade or more, and well, we've always measured this, and this is what's coming from the executive suite. Well, the executive suite isn't in the contact center every day, and they don't know what they don't know. And so part of my challenge to every single one of us is we need to make sure that we have a voice in the boardroom to talk about what actually happens at the contact center, what matters, how we measure what we measure. And that's even why I said that strategic value is what I think is the most important, because that's how we will stand apart in the boardroom. If our conversation is always about costs, or it's always about productivity, then we have already put ourselves into a box and limited what we can accomplish there. But what I also know, Johnny, and for all of you here, is that getting access to that information in a meaningful way is really, really hard sometimes. We have multiple systems that we're working through. We don't necessarily know where to get the information or how to measure it. And so for us to get to that point where we're successful, we have to have easy access to our insights. They need to be intelligent, that we aren't doing the work. We're not having to work on our system, but our system is actually working for us. And then a coordinated strategy of what do we do with these metrics once we have them. And so here's what I want to leave everybody with on how do you start on that path to success. Number one, define success. Define what is your contact center all about? What makes you important to your organization, important to your employees, important to your customers? And then inventory the things that you're measuring and say, does this fit? And it might hurt it might hurt. You might realize that you've been doing something and it's not giving you success. But if you've been measuring something and not getting success, then why are you continuing to measure it? So part of that is engaging your employees in that open conversation, and be okay with the answers. If they tell you that they don't feel like your metrics are working, don't just say, well, you need to get on board with that. Because that's not going to work. Engage them in a conversation. Understand why. Why are they frustrated about the things that you're measuring on them? Why don't they feel like it's working? From a system standpoint, and to the point of artificial intelligence, I actually think as organizations, we're going to make more headway in the now, not just by ripping out our live agents and throwing AI and bots at them, but for artificial intelligence to be native to our technologies, native to what we're doing, and using it to process information, to process our metrics and tell us that, well, our forecast is off, and here's why. Here's what we need to do. Or telling us that customer satisfaction is down. These are the triggers. But we can only do that when everything all comes together. And I know one of the things, and this is the very quick piece of this, is part of what, Johnny, having spent 2 decades in the contact center, the reason that 6 months ago I decided to walk away from being a consultant and a speaker is because I had not seen a organization who's doing what Talkdesk was doing and making intelligence part of what we do so that we really can provide better experiences. So, to that point, that's what we're about. That's what we've been working on. And I know there's opportunity for people who want to see more. We're going to have opportunity for that as well. But that's my bit. I hope that people, this gets you thinking. I'd love to see people on the CX tour. Go to talkdesk.com and we've got all the dates there. But Johnny, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Justin. Some great insight there. Certainly, what do you want to achieve? You need to define success. I think it's important to benchmark yourself against where you are now and where you want to be, rather than necessarily looking at other companies. There's a misalignment between what we measure and our employees and customers, which we need to overcome. And strategic value is the most important factor. It's not cost, it's not productivity, it's strategic strategic value. So I think it ties in very well. If you would like to have a demonstration of the Talkdesk IQ product, now is the time to pop your vote in the poll box. I'm sure Justin would be delighted to get that organized for you. And we're going to jump across to the chat room now and have a look at some of the top tips and questions that are coming through. We asked the question of the audience, which is how do you get your people excited about your metrics? Carl says recognition and painting the bigger picture of what the metric is and aiming to what it is aiming to achieve. So I guess that ties very much into the defining success and also looking at purpose. Zahela said, if they don't believe in the product or the company, that is an issue. So how do we truly engage them? There are different levels and layers to recognition. I think very important. Gamification of metrics, says Matt. Angel says, we're trying to tie the metric back to the company goals and connect them to the big picture and how they're contributing to the success of the company. And Elizabeth says, keep your staff informed as to the purpose of the metrics and how staff affect them. So I guess all 5 of those, I guess, tie into what Natalie was saying on purpose, and Justin around what you were saying about what you want to achieve in defining success. So I think we've got a very good alignment overall in there. So we've got a question in from Carl that says, how would you measure productivity in a call center that has multiple product lines, different average handling times to each line? Calls per hour is a popular measurement, but you can't be used in an environment that has variations in call volumes and average handle times. Justin, I know we were saying that perhaps productivity is not the measure to look at. What's your thought on this?
Yeah, so my first question goes, why are they asking the question, right? What do they really want to know? What do they really want to do with it? Are they trying to drive more productivity out of their workforce? Are they trying to figure out where inefficiencies are? Are they trying to staff and forecast differently? Because every single one of those depending on how they're answering it, I'm going to give a different response on the metric there. So yeah, calls per hour is very popular in a sales environment. So if you're a sales environment and what you are specifically doing is outbound trying to hit people, then sure, it's a popular measure. If you want to put it out there, is it the best? I would argue no. But again, I think they have to go back to, I don't think this is the question that they really want the answer to. I think they're trying to get something else. And so my challenge would be go back and refine, what do you really want to do?
Indeed. Gradol says employees are key to the customer experience. They engage with them on a daily basis. They know them best. Employee involvement in the identifying metrics that help increase customer satisfaction instills a sense of responsibility and ownership, which I think is fabulous. And Tiffany says we need to take the lead. One of the factors will allow companies to succeed is by removing the archaic way of thinking. So hopefully we've been part of that removal process. Well, unfortunately, we've reached the top of the hour. So in one or two words for our metrics, I'd like to, if you could say, what did you like best about the webinar? The winning tip, drum roll, is from Suzanne, who says, you need to observe behaviors and ask for the story behind the numbers in addition to the metrics. I know, Justin, you're a great believer in storytelling around metrics. There is always a story behind the numbers, and you need to ask what really drove the result and observe that as well. We've got a little survey for you to fill in as you close down. It's only 4 questions long. You can watch the replay later on today, and we're going to be back in 2 weeks' time on the 2nd and 3rd of April for our online conference. So I'm delighted to say thank you very much to our 2 speakers. Natalie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Jonty, thank you for having me. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us as well, Justin.
Great, Natalie, Jonty, thank you so much.
So wonderful, you've been a great audience, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time for our online conference. Thank you then, goodbye.
Cheers.